Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, it's a big one. We're going to be talking about the latest self-titled album from Weezer, otherwise known as the Black Album. So I'll say it. Weezer probably shouldn't have gotten famous off of the Blue Album. Now, if that sounds insane, let me qualify that I'm not saying the album is bad. It's a great listen, arguably one of their best, if not the best. I'm also not saying that they didn't deserve a cult following or that album shouldn't become a cult classic with time. Again, given what it represented in the mid-90s to a swath of kids looking for a middle ground between power pop, indie rock, and the whatever was left of grunge, the album fits a role. I totally get why it got big. But with the benefit of hindsight, it was a project that put Weezer on the very top, honestly too early, and it's become abundantly clear that Rivers Cuomo has reacted rather badly to the fame brought on by that project over the course of the past 25 years. First you had Pinkerton, an album that won its critical acclaim decades later from those who understood what it meant in emo, but at the time was savaged by the fans and the critical press alike. And considering that Pinkerton was written in a moment of great but ugly vulnerability from Rivers, it slammed the door on him making such material for years to come, not helped by the growth of mainstream accessible emo inspired by Pinkerton that he's always tried to keep at arm's length. And so, Weezer retreated into self-aware irony, a hermetic vacuum-sealed detachment that allowed them to become increasingly cynical with every passing year, and even mine a real hit out of it in 2005 with Beverly Hills. But the returns, they were diminishing. It wouldn't be until 2014 where the band returned to their roots with Everything Will Be Alright in the end to regain some sort of acclaim from the fans and the critics. But what do you do then? Again, it's hard to avoid how much of Weezer's work reads as responses to a long splintered and impossible to please fan base and rather skeptical critics who can't comprehend the emotional turmoil that spawned a project like Pinkerton, to say nothing of the explosive and immediate backlash it faced at the time. So why would Rivers Cuomo want to go back if that possibility still exists? And thus going back to the White Album and Pacific Daydream, it's hard not to place them in the context of Rivers Cuomo's Arrested Development, with no clear idea where to go next, just follow whatever works. I mean, you want to hope there's a little more emotional maturity and insight until you realize through the interviews and annotations that even in his mid-40s it's not coming. And why in the nine hells would he even want to grow up anyway, if that's not what the fans want? So why not put out a cheap and mostly embarrassing album of covers in the Teal Album? People seem to like the adolescent shitposting. Africa was one of the most successful singles in years. Why not give them what they want? Well, to get some of an answer to that, it looks like we had to go into the Black Album, the second project Weezer's releasing in 2019, framed as one of their darkest albums to date, and one that's polarizing critics and fans alike, mostly because it's reportedly being framed as a response to them. Now, if you've been reading through a lot of Weezer's extended discography as a response to their opening success, especially in recent years, this should not be a surprise. I mean, there's a tension, the center cannot hold, but hey, could it at least be good? Could we get some decent music along the way? Honestly, not really. Now, let me get this out of the way first. On my first couple listens through this album, it is better than Pacific Daydream, or at least I thought it was. Hell, probably even more listenable than that Teal Album thing, at least for me. But if you're looking for a project where it becomes patently obvious that Weezer is starting to swallow their own tail, it is this one. And all the more alarming is that they seem to have kind of realized it halfway through musically that it might be a bad idea, and then tried to pivot into anything else. And all of which leaves the Black Album on a compositional level as something of a mess, and yet it's sadly not just as interesting as it should be. A bunch of bad ideas only redeemed to mediocrity by the fact that Weezer can still construct a decent tune, and then you get into the lyrics, and the mediocrity tips right back into bad again. But you know what, even how they're writing good tunes, it's worth noting, so let's start off with the compositions and the production, the latter of which was handled on this album by David Sitek of TV on the Radio. And not handled well, for the record. I could swear I've said this time before, and I could say it again. While we are years away from Matt Sharp's essential bass lines, that bass and guitar interplay is one of the focal points to why their first two albums were so damn great. And yet again, with the Black Album, nobody seems to really care about those bass lines. Oh, you can occasionally hear them when they're trying to desperately punch up some sort of groove, like on the opener Can't Knock the Hustle, but most of the low end just seems completely removed from the mix across the entire album, which is kind kind of important if you're trying to flip the sound into darker territory, especially in mainstream accessible pop rock. Yeah, again, it sounds like they're integrating more minor chord progressions into the main melodies and continuing to pull from the sunshine pop of the last project. It does lead to a couple good moments, even if they're trying to subvert them, like the piano-backed High's a Kite or the hazy pseudo Coldplay I'm Just Being Honest. But even that song is a recycling of a tune from River Cuomo's side project that's in J-Rock called Scott and Rivers, and the closing track California Snow, it was originally told from a movie soundtrack from last year, which kind of makes sense given how the thicker buzzing synths and the pseudo-rapping doesn't really match much of anything in the instrumental palette on this project as a whole. Now, if anything, while the whole album might sound a little bit more upbeat and give the melodies a little more flair compared to Pacific Daydream, the acoustic guitars, they sound incredibly sickly. The percussion is just weary or undercooked, and moments where the album could build momentum, like in the pseudo-disco touches around Too Many Thoughts in My Head, they just turn into a runny mess. Same case with the hook of Living in LA, as a matter of fact, and that doesn't count the grainy films that are plastered over Zombie Bastards and Byzantine that just don't sound well mixed at all, especially in the low end. But you know what? Maybe the dissonance is part of the point? After all, this is the project that's being framed as the dark one. Weezer trying to get murky and unsettling. And along the way, give a giant middle finger to everyone who wants them to revisit the emotional vulnerability and rawness of Pinkerton. And while they don't really spare themselves in the framing, some of the sad sack sarcasm doesn't exactly net positive rewards for them on Piece of Cake or I'm Just Being Honest. It's just hard to ignore barbs thrown at critics like on Can't Knock the Hustle, or a legion of unthinking fans on Zombie Bastards who don't want them to change, or even the algorithm-dominated music industry overwhelming them on Too Many Thoughts in My Head. And you know what, if I didn't make this clear from the beginning, I will here. I don't mind them taking these shots. Hell, Weezer's more entitled to take them than a lot of acts. They have an unpleasable fan base, and if they want to break free and make whatever the hell they want, all the power to them. Hell, it's one of the main reasons why the exuberance of High as a Kite at least feels real. It is escapist. But as you slowly get deeper into the album, you come to realize that Rivers Cuomo might be picking up one of the most nakedly unattractive ways of avoiding responsibility yet: nihilism. Because hey, why not just do tons of drugs and fuck around? Creation of art is the vanity upon vanities anyway, if we're gonna quote Ecclesiastes. None of it matters, right? And here's where I hit my breaking point. Because again, I have said it time and time again, but with Weezer, it's all the more important. Nihilistic, self-consuming art without any sense of a deeper message. It not only really grates on my nerves, but can also get really goddamn tedious, especially coming from the faux-detached, lazy Gen Xers, and Weezer hits into all those categories in a big way. I mean, you might complain about the algorithms and an overload of information on Too Many Thoughts in My Head, Rivers Cuomo, but you're the ones who chose to make a cover album full of shitposts. You chose to make your closing track an extended cocaine reference that doesn't really mean much of anything, and you try and mostly fail to rap. And while I might kind of agree with Byzantine, which was co-written by Laura Jane Grace, and you can absolutely tell how the complexity of the music's often in the eye of the beholder, and that they're really often more simple than they're given credit, that's not an excuse to stop trying. And while a huge part of this is anchored in Rivers Cuomo's delivery, like it or not, he can't sell anger or even much sarcasm or go for broke recklessness with any kind of convincing power, and even his attempts at dejection, they feel mostly underwritten. What really turned me against this album outright was the Prince Who Wanted Everything, which on the surface, it seems like a mostly sincere tribute to the late Prince through a parade of references, and then you notice how more of the actual bars seem to focus on those stealing from his estate, or how pointless all of his strides and successes towards artistic freedom appear after his death, or how even the hook is structured as the Prince Who Wanted Everything, implied that he could never have it, as if wanting artistic freedom or success or to create freely is something that ought to be derided. And the sad fact is that Rivers Cuomo actually confirmed some of that whole thing in side interviews. So, Rivers, I say this from the bottom of my heart. Nothing you have ever or ever will create will be on the same level of Prince's best, both in musicality or content. And your lazy justification of non-effort, it both reeks of wasted privilege and artistic bankruptcy, especially here. So yeah, I might have begun this whole endeavor trying to give Weezer every single benefit of the doubt, but given that they've stopped caring and just want to drift away on a nihilistic bender, and they don't care about the fans, or the critics, or the audience, gloves are coming off. because I don't think I've seen a less consistent band squander this many chances given to them and this much fame. This is Weezer's 13th album. And of that number, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 of them are at least good. That's a failing record over 25 years. And the fans and the critics, they've tolerated multiple periods of their career of emotionally inert shitposting with increasingly vapid results, an astonishing waste of talent and goodwill that for me is starting to rival that of Eminem, but at least M would never have the audacity to say the legacy of a man like Prince doesn't matter, as a fellow musician too. The meaning of life is to give life meaning, Rivers Cuomo, and you should have retired 15 years ago, because about clear you stopped caring about making something that actually matters. And this album doesn't matter. And I'm giving it a 4 out of 10, no recommendation, and let's give it precisely what it deserves. Obscurity. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know I got angry with this, guys. I'm sorry, and honestly, this review's been living hell to film, but again, kind of crapping on the legacy of a man who was a far better artist than you ever were, trying to highlight it as if none of it all matters. Even if you're including yourself in the framing, it is of astonishingly bad taste. And the thing is, I don't even know if he cares. It clearly sells. You can tell they don't really care that much about this album. So why give it any sort of respect? Why go there? It's just kind of gross, and I'm not going to endorse it whatsoever. But hey, you want to buy it, you want to stream it, links down there below. Got the poll up there for all you Weezer fans. Tell me how wrong I am, although with this time, I really don't think I am. But hey, beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you guys want to get involved in helping support me, link to my Patreon right over there. I'm still trying to do some things, we're trying to figure things out. We'll see how it goes. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.